Jay Gabler, Duluth News Tribune arts and entertainment reporter, back with another special episode of the DNT Minute featuring my column, Front Row Seat. And this week I had a front row seat to Duluth Harbor. My seat was in a sailboat. How does a sailboat leave a dock? That's not the setup for a punchline. It's a real question that hadn't occurred to me until Friday afternoon when Zachary Lang and I were sitting in a 19-foot Flying Scot that was going precisely nowhere. It was a bit more boat than I'd expected to be handling for my first time ever taking the helm of a vessel under sail, but it's still pretty basic as far as boats go. No engine, 2 sails, 1 rudder. Whatever the wind does, that's what you have to work with. Fortunately, I had a pro on board. Lang is waterfront director at the Duluth Superior Sailing Association. Superior refers to the city, he clarified, not the lake. The organization maintains a fleet of sailboats on a pier leased from the city of Duluth, jutting west into the harbor from Minnesota Point. Formed in 1984 as a joint venture between 4-H and Duluth Parks and Rec, according to the organization's website, the DSSA provides accessible opportunities for sailors at all levels of experience to get out on the water. There's a charge for memberships and lessons, but Lang said that we don't turn children away, no matter their financial background. That's the wonderful thing about sailing. You can start at any age. It's for everyone under the sun, Lang continued. Some of us started at a young age, and then I have instructors down here that started sailing a year ago, and now they're a certified instructor. Prior to Friday, I'd been a sailboat passenger a couple times, but never attempted to actually operate a sailing vessel. Lang agreed to take me out for a typical first-timer's lesson. Aptly, the lesson began with reading the wind. The charm and challenge of sailing is that it's a constant dance with the wind. At times, it's more like a wrestling match. The wind blows where it will, although your concern has more to do with where it's coming from. You control the sails and the rudder, and if you can't go straight in your desired direction, you can approach a target through a series of diagonal steps. I got the gist, since that's also the way my golf game tends to proceed. If your stereotype of sailing involves tying a lot of knots and then settling in for a relaxed ride, I'm here to tell you that one of those 2 things is correct. Even before we left the pier, I learned 3 new knots, the goal being to keep lines, you don't call them ropes in sailing, I learned, where you want them. You also want to keep your various extremities unscathed. Only once did Lang have to chasten me for wrapping a line around my hand as if I'd never seen the seafaring reality show Below Deck. The wind was light on Friday, but the lines can go quickly taut when the sails catch wind. I thought that having read a stack of Clive Cussler books might have given me a head start on the sailing life, but it turned out that basically got me as far as knowing port from starboard. Well, that and I can tell you where Atlantis went, but it's not in Duluth. There was a lot more lingo to learn, and I can't say I mastered it all, but I did learn how to describe the motion of a sail hanging loose, that's luffing, and the point at which a boat's motion is stopped, that's being in irons, not in chains, locked up, or ironed out. I got it eventually once I remembered we were actually sailing and not naming Richard Marx ballads. After several hours of lessons, Lang told me, a person can handle a boat like the Flying Scot solo. I can't yet imagine how a lone sailor would manipulate the 2 jib lines and the single mainsail line while also steering the boat, but several hours seems like a reasonable investment to achieve a level of skill that will impress your friends and, if relevant, intimidate your enemies. Lang is a regular participant in the Duluth sailboat races that happen weekly. It's a chess match, he said with delight, explaining how competitors jockey for advantage based on the prevailing wind and the right-of-way rules. For example, a boat on a starboard tack has the right-of-way over a boat on a port tack. Got that? I can't say that I have entirely, but I did enjoy several opportunities to experience the excitement of tacking from port to starboard and vice versa. That's the moment at which, when sailing into the wind, you switch the sails from one side to the other so as to keep moving forward while staying at least approximately on course. While struggling to develop a feel for the way the boat moved with respect to the wind, I found myself thinking of societies where sailing is or has been a routine mode of transportation, where learning to sail would be like learning to ride a bike. For many of us today, exposure to sailing has more often come through pop culture. As we sailed, Lang and News Tribune digital producer Dan Williamson laughed at a reference to the movie What About Bob? I'm sailing! For my part, I thought of the sailing misadventure in Alan Alda's The Four Seasons. I don't see any trip to St. Croix unless we have a meeting first. I don't picture us seeing St. Croix unless it floats by. By the end of 2 hours, I'd steered the boat, tacked the sails, and hadn't fallen into the harbor or hit anything. We hadn't gone anywhere fast, but we'd certainly gone somewhere. It's empowering to understand even the basics of how a sailboat moves. Next time I see the chess game of a sailing race down on the lake, I'll have at least a rudimentary grasp of how the racers are riding the wind. I may even return to the DSSA for more lessons. You can't have this kind of experience just anywhere, after all. Lang helped me to imagine what it would be like to sail a wider swath of the harbor. Experienced sailors even pass under the aerial lift bridge and out onto Lake Superior. Lang pointed out, you get to see downtown Duluth and the Hill, and then you can come back and get to see all the industry that's going on. Then Superior, Wisconsin as well, and as you make your way over here, you get to see Park Point and all the big red pines and stuff. It's like two worlds within one sail. Since it was only my first time out, I felt I had license to be a little on chill once we'd secured the lines and stowed the sails. I climbed into my car, rolled down the windows, and pulled out onto Minnesota Avenue, blasting Sailing by Christopher Cross. The Yacht Rock King isn't wrong. The canvas can do miracles. That's this week's column. I'll be back next week to tell you how I fared in my first ever non-virtual 5K. Until then, I'm Jay Gabler, Duluth News Tribune.